Well, hello, hello, hello out there to all of you beautiful Black podcasters. My name is Latrice Sampson Richards. I am the host of the 2023 Black Podcasting Awards. And as usual, I am super excited to be here with y'all tonight. I'm very excited that I get to talk to my friend, my homie, and one of the people in this industry that I really, really look up to, Miss Adell Coleman. Hey, Adell.
Hey,
How
I'm
you
so happy
doing,
to be
girl?
here and talking to
Yes,
you.
yes. This is how I felt. Like I've been excited for all of my interviews, but like this, I'm very, very, very excited about this interview because you are like a wealth of knowledge and like you black as hell and like you just real cool. You know what I'm saying? Like you just one of the people in this industry that I appreciate so much because you really it's like the person you really are the person I thought you were. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Like you see people online and people be like, "Oh, do you know her? She's, she's this, she that." And it's like, "Oh my god." So when I finally get to meet you and find out that you are everything that I thought you were and more, like that feels really, really good. So I'm excited to be here with you tonight,
aw.
sis.
All the
Yay.
things. I feel the
Oh,
same way about you. I was like, we were instantly tight. Me and Latrice was tight.
yes, yes,
You're amazing.
immediately.
You're so
Hey,
awesome.
Maze, we got Maze in the Facebook chat saying, "So glad to catch live." We glad you catching us live too. But for those of you who are not catching us live, if you're watching this on the replay, make sure you go ahead and comment #replay so we can say, "Hey, girl, hey," or whatever. Because we be trying to make sure we include everybody. Some people be on CP time, and that's all right as long as you watch. So tonight, Adele and I are giving you kind of an inside scoop on our industry specific categories. So this is the industry insider. And I could not think of a better person to have this conversation with because Adele is the chief operating officer for DCP Entertainment, which, if you don't know, is a big ass job. So, Adele, talk to us a little bit. Let the people know a little bit about like what you do, your how long you've been podcasting, and what is it that you get out of being a podcast producer and a podcaster?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been in audio production for over 15 plus years of background in radio production and all that jazz. And then podcasting for the last 5 or so years has been great. My role at DCP is we're a multimedia company, but we're focusing on the avenue of podcasting, telling stories from Black voices and underrepresented voices for diverse communities because, we felt like it's important to be able to tell our stories from our perspective and those unique backgrounds, and we understand us and our vibes and everything like that, and just creating a space for diversity,
Mhm.
where and not just saying it, but actually doing it. Um, so I oversee our daily operations. We have multiple different podcasts that we put out on a weekly basis. We have a few things in production that we do. I do a lot of our growth strategies, do a lot of promos, cross promotions, and branding and content around that. Oversee our newsletter that we have over there, your podcast playlist, which is about discovery podcasts, not our podcast, but we always highlight other podcasts within the communities
And I love
because we
it.
want
It's
to
so
know what's
important. Like it's really good. Y'all should sign up for that newsletter for real because I'm a podcaster that podcasts. I mean that
out.
listens to podcasts. And it's I have found so many new shows just from your newsletter. Like it's
Oh,
a good way to discover new work and new people and new sound and all of that. So y'all sign up for the newsletter. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yes. You're all good. And honestly, my favorite thing about podcasting is podcasts, of course, and then just meeting cool people and like really learning what other people's experiences are so that we can all grow. Podcasting is forever changing. Every time you think you got an understanding of it, something new happens, some new
Mhm,
curveball happens that throws everybody back. So many different developments all the time. So
mhm.
just trying to stay connected with folk and just kind of having these conversations about how we're all moving forward. That's probably one of my favorite things about the podcasting space.
Yeah, I love that as well. I love that podcasting really has kind of like it has shattered the glass ceiling, as people say.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? But like for everybody, that's what I was trying to say. I couldn't think of the term that I normally say. It is the great equalizer. It really is the great equalizer because it's a relatively low barrier to entry, but then you get in there and you have so many different perspectives, and like anybody can share their perspective, whether it's helpful to the world or not. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully, you'll choose to talk about something that enriches the world in some way, or at least that's my choice. But regardless, like there's a podcast for everything. There's a podcast for everybody. And if you can't find the podcast that you want to listen to, you can literally create it in like 5 minutes. It might not
Exactly.
be, great, but you can make it. And that's one of my favorite things about podcasting as well as like just the art of podcasting and
Mhm.
actually like, you know, all of the things that it takes to make a podcast happen. And
Right.
so, one of the things that I was most excited about for this year for the awards was the fact that we are highlighting industry professionals this year and like have created categories specifically for industry professionals, because before it was all about podcast categories. Excuse me. Yeah, yeah, categories. That's what Apple calls them too, right? Yeah. So like
Mhm.
categories of
Yep.
podcasting. But now we are really showing some love to the professionals or indie professionals that make those things happen. So I know under DCP, you do a lot of the things, including the hiring and the firing. Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Yes.
She's the big boss. Okay. I'm gonna start calling you Kiki. I'm gonna start calling you Kiki.
Yeah.
But, I wanna talk a little bit about some of these categories and, like, what it takes to really be the best in whatever that, chosen area is. So let's start off with the best editing. So
Mhm.
I'm over here, you guys, you can't see my screen, but I'm looking on the blackpotawards.com website. If you head to that website, go to the FAQ in the menu. It's going to give you a drop down. Go to the award categories, and you can read right along with me. Okay. But the best editing category description says this award recognizes exemplary achievement in the condensation of episode content, development of a cohesive theme throughout, and delivery of top notch audio quality. You must include at least 3 reels up to 5 minutes each. And I want to stress that 3 reels up to 5 minutes each,
She
not
said, "Don't be sending
three.
me those 10-minute clips."
Listen, don't send no 3 5-minute reels. It's not necessary, okay? It is not necessary. It is 3 reels up to 5 minutes each, and clearly each one of those reels needs to be a different project that you have worked on. And so that's the description for the category. Exemplary achievement. Let's start there. What does it take for an editor to be able to say that they have reached the level of exemplary achievement? What does an exemplary
Mm,
editor look like?
that's a good question. I
Mhm.
want to also say real quick before I get into that is these awards, like this category to me is so important because we often don't think about how the sausage is made. We often
Yes.
kind of look at what's visually or audio in front of us instead of like thinking about all the pieces that
Mhm.
go behind it. And there are a lot of very hardworking people in podcasting that sit and sift through audio and edit and really stare at different projects, map things out. It isn't, about just kind of, throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I think
Right.
where this come from, my background in radio and time at Sirius, like those people that are making the train go often
Mhm.
go overlooked. So I'm so excited about now having these different group, this category here to
Mhm.
now acknowledge those folk that are not necessarily like on the cover art or whatever, but their names in the credits, but they're not getting as much as not acknowledgement, as they should. So I'm super
I
excited about
agree.
that. I wanted
I
to say that.
agree. 100%.
All
Yes.
right. So what makes a good exemplary editor? First of all, I would say having a good ear, and that just kind of takes time. Like the more you're in it, the better you get at it. Like
Mhm.
who I was 10 years ago at listening to audio and editing is a very different person now. Like I will tell people I am blind, but I can hear for miles. I can hear a pin drop for miles and
They
miles and
say
miles.
when one of your senses is impaired,
Listen,
the other one's enhanced
I
to make
might
up
not
the
see you,
difference.
but I will hear you. Okay, like it's crazy. But I said to say like developing a good ear, just really listening to not just your projects but other people's projects, and not even
Mhm.
from um not just necessarily for leisure, but you can listen and find different ways to help you understand how people kind of got to different things, understanding crossfades and different things that you can do to make and enhance a podcast. What good
Mhm.
music goes in it. One of my biggest pet peeves is people not paying attention to levels. Simple
Mhm.
editing. You can't have a host all the way up here and the music all the way up here,
Wait,
and then
can
the
we
music.
talk about it? Let's just pause for the cause. Let's
Yeah,
just pause for the cause. Because that is one of as an award-winning podcast producer, okay?
let's go.
That
Yes,
is that is like one of my biggest pet
it drives
peeves.
me crazy
It drives me absolutely crazy, and any
because you know
editor
what
that
it
I work
tells
with
me.
is one of the first things I tell them.
And it tells me you're not listening. You're not
Mhm.
listening back to your product. I know I've seen some editors in the past will throw audio track underneath, a music track, a music bed under an audio track, and it clashes. That tells me
Yeah,
that you're not listening. You're not
yeah.
listening through. And just because you kind of put everything up together and you build everything and then you master it down and mix it, you have to still listen through to make sure that your levels are where they need to be. If
Mhm.
compression or any effects need to be added, they're added. You can stop a song because I've had some podcasts like the song just keeps going and going. That's cool. We're not gonna switch it up. At any
Right.
point, now it's distracting. Like I feel like, can we switch? Can we fade out and come back to this song? Like, can we mix it up, please? Like now I'm
Can
like,
we do something different, girl? Can we do something different? Yes,
I feel like
yes.
podcasting allows for such a creative space for especially someone who really loves and gets into audio, that you can really just kind of play around with different music libraries, listen to your host. Like things happen. Sometimes audio crashes. Sometimes, things get corrupted. Sometimes you're on site for something and your recorder went out or a big siren or something happened in the background. Some things that you can't control. There are
Right.
things and that you can do, like I said, playing around with compression. Adobe has like a whole suite now that tries to do noise cancellation and background cancellation that you can learn and play around with and really understand your craft. But even
Mhm.
if certain things kind of slip through, there are still creative ways to try to mask certain things. There are certain kind of ways that you can, like, even as an editor, be like, hey, let's acknowledge that there was a siren. What can
Yes.
we do there? Can we play around with that and mix it in creatively? It's literally just about the structure and what you're building and putting it together piece by piece, but really listening to your work. And I
Mhm.
get it. This is coming from somebody, like I said, I used to work at a freaking radio station and I had to do promos, build them, which meant I had to listen to a 30-second bit 100 sometimes. By the end of it, I'm memorizing. Okay, the music goes do 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 here, and I gotta do this. Like by
Right.
the end of it, I'm driving home from work saying the promo in my head because
Right.
it's things that you can catch, understanding the levels, and also acknowledge that the same way we get nose blind, your ears can get numb to certain things. So if you're listening to something
Mhm.
over and over again, walk away, take a beat, go talk to somebody, and then come back. You'll hear it differently. If you're
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
stuck in it, you're not going to. So
Yes.
really just kind of taking notes. Don't be afraid to write down timestamps and time codes for things that may work for you. Really being creative, really just like expanding upon yourself. Like I would love to hear more soundscape projects from our community. Like not really
Mm.
being afraid to tell a story, not just verbally, but through sound design. Like there are so many different ways we can do that without kind of
Uh-oh.
overcompensating and being more creative with
Mhm.
that. I would love to hear more stuff like that and those type of audio projects where you're listening, but you can see it because it sounds so dope. Like you can
Yes.
vision it without a person saying the door open. You can just hear it. Like you can really move into that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that falls under the sound design, best sound design category. Which let me tell y'all real quick what that one is. Hold on, let me find it again. I'm on the Black Pod Awards website. Best sound design. Oh, girl, that is not best sound design. That's best sex podcast. Girl, I'm about to read off the wrong one. Listen, but good sound design can,
Listen, you can it can make it.
listen. All right, best I'm not playing with you, girl. Best sound design, exemplary achievement in the art and practice of creating layered sound for podcast projects. Soundscape that is integral to the flow of content in a seamless, engaging, and innovative manner. Again, must include at least 3 reels up to 5 minutes each. So let's talk about this sound design a little bit more,
Mhm.
right? And kind of flesh out sound design from editing, right?
Right.
Because they are two different steps in the
Yep.
process
They're
technically, but
close,
those
but they're
two steps,
different.
yes, they oftentimes they go hand in hand, right? But what is the difference between
Mhm.
editing and sound design?
So an editor can do sound design, but an editor is not limited to a sound design type podcast. When I'm saying sound design, I'm thinking about soundscaping. So where
Mhm.
you're having a whole podcast that you're telling the story and the background audio, be it music, sound effects, whatever, is helping to push and move the story. Versus
Mhm.
just in editing, you just might have a song or two that might help with transitional stuff. Or I
Mhm.
love when a podcast has a sounder or a slight music bed that may lead us into a break. So I know
Yes.
when I hear this go boo boo boo, I'm about to hear an ad. Okay, bet I can just I know
Yes.
what's happening. Especially if I'm a regular listener. An editor can even have something that might not have music. We're just focusing on keeping the audio clean, keeping the interviews clean, building out the show, mapping out what it sounds like, and like really putting
Mhm.
those pieces together. Time codes are important, and building that out. Now, sound design,
Yes.
soundscaping, all that. Like I said, I want to see more of that. Like I say, I really feel like it can start really simple. Um, like I used to do this podcast for this science organization here in the DC area, and they were like mild sound design. I'm like, what does that mean? Like mild, like what are you asking me to do?
Right.
So like they'll tell a story about some frogs. So I'll put like subtle little frog sound effects that aren't too cheap, too cheesy sounding, or like a water swishing, like subtle. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
I like
Mhm.
that. Just a little accent. Now it doesn't mean every time they be like, into the line. I'm like, roar. No, I'm gonna leave that one alone. I'm gonna just mild, subtle, low key, right? And then there are stuff that like we have different podcasts that literally like the soundscaping, the sound design moves the whole story. Like it really
Yes.
kind of continues with it,
I
like
think about audio dramas,
audio dramas.
you
Like you
know,
think about the Princess of South Beach. That is
yes.
one of the strongest, hands down to me, soundscape telenovelas. I'm all in. Like, oh wow,
What
she's
is
so.
it?
It's called The Princess of South Beach.
Oh,
That
girl, you
podcast is
hold on.
crazy.
Hold on.
It's crazy. Okay,
Let me look
like
that up real quick.
you
Let me
will
look
feel
that
like
up.
you're watching a TV show. Like seriously, it feels like it's a telenovela. I believe that's what it's called.
Okay, but I
Yeah.
also, what's another audio drama that I believe has a really great soundscape, and they should because they got money. But Bronzeville with
Mm-hmm.
Lorenz Tate,
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence Fishburne, Tika Sumpter. I think even Ghost was on there. What's his name?
Yeah.
Amari Hardrick.
I'm a
Um,
hundred. Yeah. I bet you call him.
yes, that Ghost Senior. That's Ghost Senior.
But like
I
you
haven't
say, they
watched those
better
shows.
because they got all the money and the resources. But I do
Yes, but
feel
they
like
do a really great job
they
with
do.
their soundscape and like really creates they put you in that time period, you know?
Hmm. And
Yeah.
I feel like it's such a thin line though because I've heard projects where the soundscaping is like too much. Like it's like every single thing has a sound. Like
Like
he picked up the
I can't you're distracting me.
pencil,
I can't even
right?
get into
Like
the show because
he walked down the
y'all keep
street, clock, 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 the
yeah,
door open.
that, but I don't need to hear them clogs
I'm
hitting the
yours.
ground. I don't need
So it's like
that.
being really like this, the soundscaping works. One, you got to really pick and choose how you're going to tell the story,
Mhm.
what things work. And like I said, that comes down to listening to it a few times. You might be like, okay, this door opening sounds dope. Then you listen to it and it's between the music behind it, another sound ending, a voice track over it. You're like, you know what, this is a little too much. So just
Yes.
having that space where you're picking and choosing, where good moments are to help move the story versus like I'm gonna make everything like I've gotten pitches with audio and I'm like, this is overwhelming because it's just way too much. Like he wrote in his journals. I don't need. Does your pencil make noise in real life? It does not. I don't need. I don't need this sound effect. Okay,
It's kind of
like
like,
this
you know,
out.
like in the fashion industry when I was an avid watcher of Project Runway,
Me
okay?
too. Okay,
And
yeah,
one of the, you know how they always say like s- edit, edit, edit your work. Like you don't need to put everything. You don't need the bracelet and the chain and the earrings and the hat
right,
and the purse and the shoe. Like you don't need all of it. I think it's, what you're describing is something that I try to do in my work and, working with editors and stuff. And it's, you have to be intentional about your
exactly,
soundscape. You have to have a
exactly.
plan for it. And if something doesn't feel like it belongs there, then you need to remove it. It doesn't need to
And that
be
and
there.
that comes with making sure that you know the story that you want to tell. Like
Yes.
really being familiar with the content and the context because like how you said, putting all these things on, when you think about that, how does that feel? That feels heavy. That feels like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, this is a lot. Like I feel just
Yeah.
really like weighed down by this. But when you really know like which story you're trying to tell and you roll through it, of course you might add some more at the end, like, okay, this works. You may cut some away. I'm that as a boss. I'm like, I need to add something here, pull this
Mhm.
away. This doesn't work. This does work because when you add soundscaping and it adds another layer to it because you
Mhm.
already have the music, you already have the voice tracking, you already have the
Mhm.
mix down. So now you're adding all these different elements to it of like what's helping move the story. So like you said, being very intentional, knowing your content, knowing what type of story you're trying to tell, and knowing like things that will help to move it forward. You don't want to
Mhm.
drag it down by the weight of all this excess stuff you decided to pile onto it. Because I would be the person to tell you I have cut off or been
Listen,
like,
cut it off
okay,
in a heartbeat.
yeah, I
Cut it
don't got.
off in a heartbeat. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna get to these comments in a second, but I just want to say, you know who else is a really good example of a great soundscape? Uh, African Folk Tales with
Yes.
Miss JoJo,
Yep.
which is a children's podcast by ABF Creative.
Creative.
Shout out
Yep.
to Wanda
Anthony and
and
all them. Yep.
Anthony and the whole ABF
Yep.
team. Love y'all. They are amazing. They are award winning. They were the first ones actually that made me realize that like we can actually win awards for this. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like that this was a thing that was possible. They won a Webby Award, their first award a
Mm-hmm.
couple years ago. And I was just like, wait a minute, we could win awards for this? When that happened, you know?
Yes. Yes.
And so shout out to ABF Creative. But if you have children or not, because it's definitely in my
Mm-hmm.
podcast rotation, African Folk Tales with Miss JoJo, it is a great example of a very
Absolutely.
intentional soundscape. And they're in the jungle, so it's a lot going on.
Exactly.
But their
Exactly.
audience is children and
Mm-hmm.
they can withstand that additional stimulation. And so I think it's very intentional the way that
Mm-hmm.
they utilize their soundscape. They give you just enough, and it's really beautiful. I love it. I love
Yep.
it.
So that goes to knowing your story and knowing your audience. Who are you
Yes.
targeting with what you're trying to tell? And what's the, like you said, the intention behind the craft?
Yes, absolutely. Let's jump into these comments real quick. Hey, Anna, the Anna Deshawn. See, we talked her up. We had talked her up. We was talking about you before we went on air, Anna.
Happy Anna
Um,
Deshawn.
Yes. Anna is on LinkedIn. Maze is on Facebook. Jared is on Facebook. Hey, Jared. I
Hi,
actually
Jared.
check out It's About Damn Time podcast. I was the
Mm-hmm.
most recent guest
Yes, he was.
last week, and we had
Great
a great
interview.
time. Thank you
I'm
so
waiting,
much.
Jared. I want to be on next.
Yes, yes. You should do that, Jared. She just told you to jump in them DMs. So don't miss your chance. Okay? Don't miss your chance. So all right. So we talked about best editing, we talked about best sound design. I want to get into one of my favorite categories, okay? And I'm slightly biased because I am this, but the best producer category, best producer category. So I'm heading on over to blackpotawards.com to check out the description of this category. And it is an individual or group that has consistently, oh, that's one of my favorite words.
Emphasis on consistently.
Listen, I enjoy its consistency. Okay. An individual or group that has consistently displayed an ability to develop and execute creative podcast content strategy and innovative perspectives. Once again, it must include at least 3 reels up to 5 minutes each. That mean they don't need to be 5 minutes each. That mean they need to be up to 5 minutes each. Okay, so work that out on your own in your own life. This is one of my favorite categories because, as I said already, I am an award-winning podcast producer. And look, Anna, watch. I'm gonna go ahead. I took a picture and I never posted it. I'm just gonna shout that out
Oh
right quick. Okay,
man.
my award came in the mail. I'm gonna post the picture. But I consider myself to be a pretty good damn producer. Okay,
Mm,
and this description I feel really encapsulates what it means to be a great producer.
mm,
And so with all of the producers, well, you are a producer yourself. You've
mm.
kind of stepped in every single role there is, because you can't manage the roles unless you know what the role got to do, right?
Yeah.
um as a producer yourself, talk to us a little bit about the process of producing content, podcast content, and what it looks like or what it means to be meticulous over every detail, and what it looks like to communicate. Like, what does it take to be best producer?
You know, the biggest thing is organization. Because like you said, I do a little bit of everything. So even though I'm COO of DCP, I also executive produce and co-host Say Their Name, which we've won the New
Love
York
it.
Festival Awards and Webby Awards for with that one.
Yes.
They're up
Yes.
there, so I'm not gonna reach up
Yes.
there. Just know
Yes.
they're up there
Just know
somewhere.
that they are there.
They're looking down on me. Um, but no, the biggest thing, well, it was a few big things. Organization is key, but I feel like the biggest thing is a producer is fearless. A
Mm,
producer is not afraid to get the soundbite they need to do, ask the questions that they need to ask, and it's not to say being in and being like aggressive, like blah, 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 but like really
mm,
taking the time to know the plan, the strategy, and how we want to come out with. So,
mhm,
and for an example, I feel like with me would Say Their Name, it's a sensitive topic. It's sensitive for a lot of these families that we're going into. But I'll
mhm.
go into an interview like, here are the things that I want to accomplish by the time I'm done with this interview. And here are the
Yes.
things that I need to have done, the questions that need to have been asked, and then you're always thinking about the next step. You're wanting
Yes.
to make sure that you're planning for the episodes. You want it for us, for each show, we always put out 2 trailers. We put out a preview trailer just saying, hey, it's coming up. An initial trailer, like, hey, we're doing this podcast. And then the second one is like a preview, hey, this is clips, this is what it sounds like, this is what's coming up. So
Mhm,
really getting into the trenches of organizing everything, making sure that you're getting those clips for the interviews, not being afraid to ask certain questions, not being afraid to chase down leads the way you may need to chase them down, being a
mhm,
little bit direct with people in the way that you need to be direct with your team and making sure
mhm,
that we're executing and, the editors and everyone understands it. For
mhm.
me, as well as like producing in that organizing and keeping calendars and timestamps and time codes. Like even when I'm in interviews, I'm thinking about not just the episode, but the trailer. I can say
Yes.
clips here. This clip works well for this. This will
Yes.
work that. for that, just not being afraid to do all of that. Oh, we can do this as a preview clip that we put out on social media. Like I'm really listening intentionally for
Yes.
where things will kind of go and where they'll play out. And it helps because for us, like at DCP, sometimes the producer work also goes in hand with the editing. You might be cutting it yourself or working really closely with the person that's going to be cutting down and
Mhm.
building it. So you already know. Like I've been in sessions where I'll be listening to a playback of something that was built. I'm like, hold on, this day we were in so and so such and such happening. You forgot the clip where this was. So you're
Mhm.
always kind of like having that meticulous mind and
Mhm.
thinking about like strategically what makes it work, what keeps everything kind of going, where these clips are, and what is the intention behind where they're going to kind of go out and help to move and embody like everything that we're kind of building and putting out here. But
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like you have the vision, like
yep,
you like I tell people when I'm editing, or like when I'm working with the editing team, which is very new for me. I've always cut my own tape. I've always done my
yeah.
own editing.
And see,
Like
that's
the
hard,
stories are
Latrice, because I'm the same way. And when you gotta like hand it over, you're like,
yeah.
okay, so let's
But
make
that's why it's so important to
yeah.
work with people that, you know, one, know what they're doing, but
Hmm.
also that can hear your vision. I hate when
Exactly.
I hate working with the editor that, you know, has it in their mind like they just gonna edit it the way they want it done. And it's
Hmm.
like, no, I'm the producer. Do what
Hmm.
I asked you for. You know what I'm saying? And so, but I don't want to lose my thought. Let's talk about producers who edit.
Hmm.
Okay, let's talk about producers who edit, because not all producers edit. That's
Correct.
an additional skill that some producers have. Talk
Hmm.
about to all of our producers out there, aspiring producers out there who maybe do not know how to edit, or they don't think it's important to know how to edit. Tell us why it's a good skill to have for a
Yeah.
producer to be able to edit.
I'm not even gonna say that you gotta be like top notch, but I feel like
Right.
in order for your language to understand each other, because sometimes an editor might make a cut because it makes sense. Not it might not be necessarily strategically what you might, okay, well, I like it sounding this way. But when they're listening and they might hear something or busyness or to make it flow better or cleanliness, they might suggest a cut because it just makes the most sense. I feel like in
Mhm.
order for you to get a clear understanding on both ends, in order for you to get a clear understanding as to why an editor may move the way that they move as far as different edits, you got to kind of speak the language. It doesn't mean you got
Yes.
to know every single thing, but just kind of speak the language. That way you can be more cohesive together. Like my background started with hosting,
Mhm.
then editing, than producing.
Yeah.
So I was able to speak all the languages of everyone's needs because I done went through everything. I knew how to kind of tiptoe a certain way to get things from the host to then go to
Mhm.
the producer to go to the editor. And even for me, sometimes as a producer, I'll make a suggestion that the editor might not understand. Like, okay, I want this to kind of flow like this. And they're like, well, it might not work. Well, let's try it out. That's why you have drafts. That's why we
Yes.
allot in for a certain amount of edits, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And then I've had times when they're here, the actor was like, yo, that was a really good call. But just being able to, on both sides, communicate well is a big part of why you need to understand, at the very least, editing. And then just really, it's another skill set that can just help you grow as you develop your own stuff. Like you should understand like how these things work. And honestly, as time goes on, between AI and all these softwares, editing is they're putting it pretty much like, hey, this is how you can cut. This can make this easier for you. I'm not saying all
Listen,
the formulas, but
listen.
it's a lot simpler than it was for me when I first started.
I'm
Let's just
sure it is. And let me tell you, so like what for me, I'm a producer that edits. And
mm,
so, I do a rough edit of any
absolutely.
project that I'm working on. I do the first cut on that project, and I just call it the rough edit. And then the rough edit is what I give to my editor, and I say, Don't touch none of the content. This is the words I want. This is the spacing I want. But I give
Mhm.
them a list, a edit
Mhm.
guide, right? I call it my storyboard edit guide because it's a little bit of
Absolutely.
both, right? And I give
Mhm.
them exact timestamps. This is where you make this cut. This is where you make this cut. This is where you make that cut. And this is the transition I want here. You could throw some music in right here. You could X, Y, and Z. But I give them an outline of
Mhm.
what it is that I'm looking for in the edit. Sometimes I give them a little bit of creative, I'm like, hey, look, right here, I feel like it needs something, but I'm not quite sure what it is. Throw something
Mhm.
on there and let me see how it is. And either I'm going to like it or I ain't going to like it. You know what I'm saying? But as a producer, being able to edit for me helps me to really have a little more control
Mhm.
over how close the vision gets to,
Mhm.
like, how close the manifestation of the vision comes to
You
what
know,
it's like in my head, because I
because
hear it
you
in my head.
understand it. You understand it. And then
Yes.
also you can set realistic standards, right? Because if I had a dollar for every time somebody threw 10 gabillion edits and was like, I need this tomorrow. Excuse
Mm.
you? Like, no. When you understand how things work, you understand what your ask is. You
Yes.
know, and Latrice, to your point, you know what to provide.
Yes.
Like I've had someone give me no information. Here's an audio track. It's 2 hours. Cut this down to an hour. You
Yeah.
give me full licensing to do that? Like, because I'm
Right.
gonna I'm gonna just cut this. Like, you're not
Listen.
saying what the context is. You're not saying what you want to say. You're not giving me really. You're telling me to cut this in half.
Yeah.
So, what do you really want? And so, to
Yeah.
your point, like we do something similar, which we will keep doing rounds. Like we will limit it. If we're working with someone, we're like, all right, we'll do 3 rounds of edits, final
Mhm.
draft. Here you go.
Yeah. And that's
The
more,
the
most
the
people just
toughest
do
one
2.
is that first one. That
Yeah.
first Yeah, and for us, to me, I say it's the skeleton. You just get the bones. This is where we're going.
Yes.
This is the direction that we're going to do. What do you want to add? What are you thinking? And to
Yeah.
your point too, I feel like when you find a good editor and you're working well with them as a producer, like our editor, for say their name, like he just gets it. Like he knows what I'm asking for. I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
I can literally be like the thingy from the other one. He'd be like, all right, I know somehow. Like he just like grab it and this the thingy, or I want this to sound like heavier. Okay, cool. I know what music to put there. Like he gets it. He loves the project. He understands the project. So I don't even give him music cues and direction. I'm like, here are
Yeah.
the ad breaks. Have at it. So once you
Yeah.
kind of each other's language and you work well together and then they come consistent on a project, actually as a producer your life gets a little bit easier, because especially if they really take it seriously and can appreciate what's going on, like they can move forward to the next steps, on
Yeah.
just making sure that they're delivering it in a good and effective way. And honestly, your turnaround time gets faster because they understand the overall project.
Which and I'll say this before we move on to the next categories, but a good producer, I feel like you can hear in the content how good of a communicator that producer
Mhm.
is. Because if they are working with the editor or working with the team in any way, you can hear in the content that they have clearly communicated the
Mhm.
vision, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that's one of the most important skills of a producer is communication. And it's something that, like
Mhm.
you talked about, like being able to speak the language. And like I had to do research to make sure that, like, when I started working with real actual editors, it wasn't just me doing everything, and I started
Mhm.
working with real editors, I had to do some research on, like, editing terms. Like, I literally just
Mhm.
Googled audio editing terms.
Love
And
that.
there's glossaries out there. There's, like, it's a whole
Mhm.
vocabulary. And
And
it's
I
just
had to do the
important to know
opposite.
that.
I had to remember that everyone doesn't come from the same background as me. So I'll be talking and be like, okay, we're gonna do this, and they be like, what is that? Like, what did you just ask me to do? And why? Because even like now, like organization to organization, and they'll tell you we'll be talking, and I'll be like blah 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 blah. She'll be like, what did you just call that? Like what is that? Like that's a thing? Like yeah, my bad. Like just coming from radio too, like certain things translate and certain things don't. But I do agree, just like making sure that you're educating yourself and just like learning more. And like it comes down to who you're working with in the organization that you're working with too. Like they may move a certain kind of way versus another organization may move. And so just making sure that we're communicating effectively and amongst each other. And to me, a good producer is like always on, in that when you're on location or you're in that interview, you're the quietest like after, because you're
Yes,
focusing, you're putting everything down, be it
yeah.
physically writing things down, typing stuff like you're literally already just kind of dumping everything out, because you're making sure that while we're in this moment with what needs to be done, we're getting it done. You're not afraid to kind of go back in and be like, hey, we missed a moment where this question was asked, can we revisit that, or this kind of went out. You're communicating with, if you're on location, the sound person, like, okay, did we get that? Do we need to get any more
Mhm,
sound bites? Do we need to grab this? Okay, this is what I need from you. Like I said, the communication, the assertiveness, and just kind of being very detail oriented. If you're
mhm.
all those things, I feel like it'll definitely translate, because, like you said, the overall vision of the podcast will make sense. Because there are
Yes.
some podcasts out there that'll be like, this is my topic. And then you're listening and you're like,
Get when we gonna get to it?
where?
When we gonna
Who
get to
where?
it? Because this
Who
don't
where?
sound like that. This don't sound like that,
It don't
okay?
sound like that.
Girl, first
Mm-mm.
of all, let me say 2 things before I forget. 1, you had mentioned earlier that you was going through some pitches, and I was like, "Oh, she taking pictures? Oh, alright then." So, I noted, okay? That's
Yes.
first of all. Second of all, what you're describing, or what you just described in terms of like um really having like a full team of people to work with as a producer, that is like the dream, because I think about what I have been able to accomplish, as a one woman show. And then I think about what I have been able to accomplish now with an editor. Like I won an award, from my first time working with an editor. I won an award. And I'm like, that's because I don't have, as the producer now, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to worry about the editing, as the producer, I can focus on the content, and I
Mm-hmm.
can really put my energy and my effort into making sure that the content is pristine, And so
Mm-hmm.
now, and it just has me thinking, like you was talking about talking to the sound guy, and I was like, wait, I'm still the sound guy though. I'm still the sound guy. But like just, one day being able to operate with a full team as a producer, that
Mm-hmm.
is my dream. Like it's something that I would love to have an opportunity to do, because I'm like, imagine what I can do if I
Accomplished.
could
Yeah.
solely focus on my job as the producer.
But the beauty of the moment though too is that you understand those roles because
Yes.
you're in them. So you know how to, because like when we did say their name last season, I was the sound person and the writer with me and Chris, and then we had someone else helping us edit because I was on location. So I
Yeah.
was like out in Chicago grabbing audio. Plus I'm producing. I'm like, okay, did I ask before I let this family go? Did I ask everything I need to ask? Like
Mhm.
to make sure I get what I need to get. And it can be a lot, but it also helps you to then understand those roles and be able to translate that when you do get to that position. Like you say, you know how to communicate, you know what you're looking for, and you know like the best ways to kind of get things turned around that they also work better for you. You know how to make your
Mhm.
special requests, because it's like people may ask for stuff that's just unrealistic because they don't understand it. But then we
Yeah.
also have to give each other grace in this space and understand that like sometimes people need time to kind of work through edits. So let's create a rollout plan. Let's create a calendar that makes sense where we're trying to hit certain
Yes.
deadlines and make sure that we're aligned. And that's also not take things personal. Like
Oh,
let's
yes.
if I say make this cut, it is not an attack on you. It is make this cut. Like let's
Yeah.
work here. And like really like even with ourselves, give ourselves grace. Because I've sat in sessions and I've edited stuff and I've been getting mad, like I just can't get it. It's just not there. Blah blah blah. Like give yourself that space and that grace to understand that you're working towards something that is going to be exceptional. And it's okay, like I said earlier, to step away from it and then
Yes.
come back to it and regroup yourself, because we as a people can just kind of become hard on ourselves, as we're trying to deliver certain things and kind of live up to certain standards, or trying to get certain quality of things out, which is great. But give yourself grace in that space as you're kind of working through all this stuff. And I have to remind myself that all the time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you have a high standard for yourself and you want to create at a
Hmm.
high level, it can be very difficult. But Jared and I was talking about on his podcast. Ain't nothing wrong with striving for 100. You know what I'm saying? You get as
Right.
close to that as you can. But it's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with striving to be toward 100. I'm gonna go back into the comments, but this is the last thing I wanted to say about um like learning the language and being able to communicate with the team and people in other. Yes, A plus plus 100, Jared. Yes. Being able to communicate with the team that you're working with, if you are privileged enough to be able to work with a team. One of the things that I have learned in my journey as a producer, even just calling myself a producer is a win for me, because
Hmm.
when you're an independent podcaster, a lot of times you don't see all of the hats that you wear because you're
Yep.
just doing it because you ain't got nobody else to
Gotta
damn
get
do.
done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it gotta get done, and you don't realize that you are wearing 6 different hats. Every episode that you put out is 6 different hats that you're wearing to make that episode happen. So even just
Hmm.
calling myself a producer it took some work, for me to get to
Hmm.
that point. And one of the things that I'm realizing and getting a lot more comfortable in is that there's some things that make sense in my head because that's my creative process, right? So like there's certain words I use, like I'm a really big fan of space, right? Like
Hmm.
quiet space, silence in the communication process, but also
Hmm.
in the facilitation of story. I think silence is extremely important,
Hmm.
from time to time, and so when I'm working with the editor, I remember the first time I worked with an editor and I was like, give it a little breathing room, and he was like, I'm confused. I don't understand what that means. And
Hmm.
I'm like, let it breathe a little bit. Like let it
Hmm.
give it a little. And it took me a while because I was like, I don't understand why you don't understand what I'm saying.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
it's my term to describe what
mhm,
I'm hearing or what I'm hearing in my head, and what I
mhm,
want to hear. And so like when it comes to that vocabulary, it's nothing wrong with, as the producer, for you to introduce the people that you're working with to how you talk about your projects. So
absolutely.
you have to learn, as the editor, as the sound designer, as whatever, you have to learn what my language is for my process. And it's completely okay if my
Mhm,
language is different than yours, as long as I'm able to communicate what
mhm,
my language is, so that when we're working together, when I say that thing, you know what it is that I'm looking
mhm.
for. So you
Yeah.
don't have to fit into a mold. We're not looking for all of the shows to sound the same. When we say best producer, we mean whatever it is that you bring to the table, whatever your style is, whatever your method is, whatever your process is, no matter where you are in the spectrum, whether you're an indie producer and the only people stuff you work on is your own, or if you produce for a network and you get paid a full-time salary to do that. It's whatever
Mhm.
your production thing is. You don't need to feel like or count yourself out because it doesn't sound like something else.
Right.
And so I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out before we
I
moved
think
on.
the biggest thing in general is just making sure that the audio is clean. Like to your
Mhm.
point about the spacing and stuff. Like if it's not an intentional edit to have something overlap, or something that could have been cleaned up, or like some sound in the background, or
Yeah.
just certain things that you don't necessarily pay attention to. That's why I said I feel like it's important that you listen to your content. Like you listen to what you're putting out there. If you don't want to listen to your content, why do I want to
Why
listen
would
to
I?
your
Why
content?
would
So
I
just
want to listen
make
to that?
sure that you're putting out there, what you want to. And the funny thing is, the trees, like when you talk about the space, like I immediately knew what you meant. I also think that, like talking to your team or whomever you're working with, just getting to know one another kind of helps that as well, kind of bridge the gap.
Yes.
Because there are some projects, like I said, I've worked on in the past where it's just an email, and I'm like, is she asking for me to cut this? Like, and then I'm like, it's a timestamp. It's nothing there. And like before, one big thing while I have people's ears, please pay attention to timestamps. Like seriously,
No,
like like like
like,
for real. Like do
like for
not
real.
tell me something is at 30 minutes and 16 seconds and it's at 21 or something. And it's like pay attention to timestamps. Like and then also
Because
understand
I told you to put it there for a reason. I
for a
had
reason.
asked you to put, like, I will sometimes I'll go deep into the timestamp. I'm like 14 minutes and 13.639 seconds.
Right.
Like, that is exactly where I want
That's
that.
exactly what I want that. And also know that when you cut audio, the timestamp shift. Like there is an adjustment. When you remove something out of the overall, it shifts. Please.
I be
Okay.
trying to tell people, when I give you your edit guide, you start from the back
The
and you
back.
start making your cuts. Just start making
Yes.
your cuts from the
The
back and just do the
timeline
cuts
shift.
first. And that
Yes.
way you know you got your cuts right.
Yes.
Yeah, girl,
And then
listen.
save that, duplicate it, and then build from the secondary one. Do not overwrite your original project. That's all I'm gonna say.
Now that's some valuable, how they say on Clubhouse, them is gems you dropping. Them is gems.
Woo, child. That's
All
all.
right, Jared said, this is the conversation I needed from y'all. This is giving me life. Yes, Jared.
Yay. Yes,
He
Jared.
also added, operating with the team is my dream too. It's like clearing space to truly tell the story you want to convey. I have to
Absolutely.
step away and come back all the time. And these are all markers, Jared, of a great producer. So we hope that
Mhm.
you are considering submitting for the category. All right.
You
The
should.
last categories that we're going to talk about today is actually three categories, but we're going to talk about them all together. And it is the best host category. Now, the best host category is split into three categories. There's best solo host, there's best duo host, and there's best team host. Okay. And so the solo host is an individual host consistently displaying an ability to deliver quality content in an engaging, informative, and entertaining manner. Best duo is any podcast hosting duo consistently displaying an ability to deliver high quality content in an engaging, informative, and entertaining manner. And best team is any podcast with at least three build co-hosts consistently displaying an ability to deliver quality content in an engaging, informative, and entertaining manner. Now, what I want to highlight for the team category, for the best hosts team category, is that it's any podcast with at least three build co hosts. So, what that means is these are the hosts of this show consistently every episode. I mean, if they sick and they miss this week, then they sick and they miss this week. But
Right.
they are consistently, their name is on the flyers, their name is on the cover art. Like they are a host of this show. We are
Right.
not talking about shows that have rotating hosts,
Host. Exactly.
okay? Right, where you just have a different host, or
Drop it in.
like it's 10 of y'all and y'all just
Right.
rotate in and out. You
Rotate.
know what I'm saying? We're talking about at least three build co-hosts, meaning that these are the hosts of this show. And so the hosting a podcast is one of those, it's a weird little thing because everybody think they could do it, and the reality is that not everybody can. You know what I'm saying? Not everybody can. And so, I'm
Ooh,
excited about this category, or these categories rather, because hosting and being a good host, I think especially when there are multiple hosts, it's a
absolutely.
skill set.
There's a skill set.
It's a skill set and it deserves to be acknowledged.
Absolutely.
In your mind, what makes a good host?
Sorry. Oh, okay. So I'm listening as you're reading it, and I just feel like it's similar and it's different for the three categories, right? Because
Mhm.
the different three subsets. And I feel like it could be subjective, but whatever. We here to hear from me, so I'm gonna talk my stuff. So one of my biggest things is a host that listens, right?
Mhm.
Of course you're there to speak, but listening, like it's a difference between hearing and listening. You
Come
can
on
hear
now. Come
something,
on.
but
Uh-oh, look at
listening
me.
is key because
Uh-oh.
listening is that's what I call it. Listening is what moves the conversation because I have heard since my days back in radio hosts who we'll have an interview, they'll ask a question, the person will answer and like throw something out there within their answer, and then the host will move right on to their next question that they have listed or they're reading from some script of their next question. And I feel like if you're not an active listener, you could
Yes.
miss something very key that a guest may say. Like I had like one interview and the lady was like, yeah, and I was riding a horse and it threw me off and that's how I broke my leg. And oh, but I broke my other leg too, but that's a crazier story. And then the host goes, so tell me about your book. I'm like, no, what's the other leg story? Like, how
What
do
happened
we,
to the
where
leg?
we, we'll get to the book. Like, you're not short on time. What's going on here? Like,
Right.
really being an active listener to the point that it helps to move the interview. Now, there are sometimes guests that can give you them one word answers. I'm not going to act like all guests are created equally. There are some guests that can be a bit tiresome, we'll say, as you're trying to move the interview. But I feel like that's another sign of a strong host that's able to still try to get the interview to move, even if, and knowing where to hold them and knowing where to fold them. If
And
you're bored
listen,
in the interview, we're bored.
let me tell you, I made the decision a few years ago that I was never, ever, 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 ever going to interview someone that I was not interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I did an interview once, and we ain't doing that. But I did an interview once, and I had no interest in nothing that this person was saying, and I was just like, I am never doing this again. This is
No,
horrible. This is absolutely horrible. Like, I agree with you 100%. You
yeah,
have to be listening to what is being said, but you also have to be listening to what is not being said, I think, as
exactly.
well. And I think when there are multiple hosts, it's also important for you to listen for when it's okay to jump
To
in,
jump
right?
in, and that's what
Like
I was
you
going to
have
say
to you have
too.
to be able to listen to those cues to
Mm-hmm.
know when it's okay to enter into the conversation again or to give your piece or whatever, whatever. Because I hate when hosts talk over each other and then it's all
Mm-hmm.
chaotic. And, I'm not trying to hear that.
And I think also like letting your question breathe, okay? Because it'll be people that be like, so, tell me about yourself. You were born in New Orleans, and then what was New Orleans like? And did you like Mardi Gras growing up? And then when you did Mardi Gras, did you go do that? And then did you travel there often? Do you like do you like to eat po' boy sandwiches? And what are po' boys made out of? What question do you want me to answer? You just asked me
Which
10 more
one?
questions, like
Pick
where we
one.
going? Or they'll start talking about themselves and answering the question, and then we still haven't gotten to the actual guest. Why are we here? It's like being able to ask a question and letting it breathe. I feel like that's really
Yes,
important. And when you have two hosts or three, knowing and having enough chemistry amongst each other that if you do have a guest that you're not stepping on each other's toes with asking the questions, you can feed off of each other within, asking the guest. You don't make the guest kind of feel some kind of way, like you make them feel included, but also just kind of learning each other well as co-hosts, on
yeah,
okay, Latrice probably gonna jump in here or let me, look at her. Like we have a vibe, we understand who gonna
yes,
kind of jump in and move forward too. Like an energy that is between you guys that makes sense. And that can get developed over time, but just like really learning how to operate around each other, what's in the space. And then I'll say
I
also
agree.
like just making sure that like because there are sometimes interviews that you want to do and you've done and they just end up dragging. Like, I've had a family member who asked to speak to me and we got there and he just did not want to speak to me. Like he just kind of shut down. Once the mic came on, it was like nah. You know, and so I was
Yeah,
like, you know what? Okay, is there anything you want to talk about? Like anything at all? You know, we talked about sports and some other stuff. And then I just kind of left it alone. You know, I didn't make him feel no kind of way. I just was like, you know, we're going to use maybe one sentence from this and then build that into another episode or not at all. Like, but
it is
knowing
what it is.
to walk away. Like we most podcasts we're putting them out, like we're not live streaming them like this. Like we're building our libraries. We're hitting deadlines, but that's the beauty is that we have the space to kind of move in a different way than like live radio
Yeah,
production and kind of be like, okay, can't do that. Let me pivot to this, you know.
yeah.
So just being able to do that, like, you know, understanding your space, understanding your guests, and even like understanding yourself. Because like I said, if you're not interested, I am probably not going to be interested because you're not interested.
Yes, yes. And once again, as we close up tonight, I just want to reiterate with these host categories, just like with the best editing category, best producer category, and best sound design category, it's about you bringing you to the table, right? I think a great host or duo host or team of hosts, they have a really strong sense of self, and they bring themselves into everything that they do. And that's what brings people back. It's, I enjoy the person that you are. I enjoy listening to you and your perspective. And I know that I'm going to get whatever it is that I came here to get, and it's going to feel like you, and it's going to kind of give me a little bit of insight into who you are. And so we're not looking for y'all to be cookie cutter. We're not looking for y'all to be like something that's already won. We're not looking for y'all to be like something that is mainstream or what you think it's supposed to be. At the end of the day, we want to celebrate Black podcasters just for being Black podcasters and for operating in excellence. And so, whatever it is that you have to bring to the table, we welcome it. We are excited about it. We can't wait to hear it. And we are definitely looking forward to celebrating it with you all this September. So, last thing I want to say to you all is that I got a text message from Demetrius a couple hours ago. And Demetrius has said for me to tell y'all that he has decided to extend the discounted pricing for that was for the month of June, right? It was supposed to expire on June 30th. He's extending that to July 17th. Okay,
Yay.
which means you can apply for the Black Podcasting Awards for $40 per category through July 17th. And I actually have a little discount code for y'all. You can use the code WINW Latrice, WINWLATRICE, the number 2 and the number 3, and get you an extra little something, something off of that.
Nice.
Okay. And
Yeah.
remember, after you do that, you're going to save your receipt and you're going to head over to podcasting seriously. Hallelujah, somebody. And you're going to apply to get reimbursed for those fees because they are well within the limits of the podcasting seriously fund. So why not put yourself in the hat? Why not give yourself an opportunity to be celebrated? Why not give yourself an opportunity to be recognized for the greatness that is
Mhm.
you? Okay.
Yep.
Adele, I love you, sis.
I love you.
And I mean that. I mean that for real,
Yes.
for real.
Yes. This has been
Thank you
fun.
so much, Adele, for just showing up the way that you show up. And personally for me, thank you for showing up the way that you show up for me in my life, but also for the community, because
Absolutely.
you're just an amazing person. You're an amazing mother. You're an amazing wife. And I'm just so grateful to have you as a part of my life. And so thank you
Yes.
for joining me.
You for having me. And you know me. I love us and our community. So people watching this, don't be afraid to hit me up. I'm not a shy about helping people and trying to connect.
She talking to
So
you, Jared. She talking to you, Jared. She done already told you now. She done already told
We
you.
just
Jump
featured
in
him
them
in our
DM.
newsletter, so check him out.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. I like Jared a lot. I like Jared a lot.
Yeah.
And so, Jared, make it happen, Cap, and make it happen. All right. All right, y'all. That's all we got tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, if you are watching this on the replay, go ahead and comment hashtag replay so we could say hey or whatever. My name is Latrice Sampson Richards. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. As always, we love y'all and we appreciate y'all. And until next time, be well. Bye,
Be
y'all.
well. Bye.